Freemasonry and Judaism, Secret Powers Behind Revolution, by Vicompte Leon de Poncins, continuing at Freemasonry and the War. Certain authors have asserted that the War of 1914 was in reality a Jewish and Masonic war, perhaps provoked and in any case utilized by them for the accomplishment of their aims, and that they were in fact the great gainers by the Peace of Versailles, by the fall of European monarchies, the demoralization of Europe, the destruction of Catholic Austria, the transfer to Jewish hands of financial supremacy. To discuss this opinion is beyond the scope of this study, but, although perhaps exaggerated, it has certainly a great part of truth. We will put into the hands of the reader a few Masonic documents which ought to enable him to form an opinion. The Sarajevo Crime and Freemasonry. On the 15th of September 1912, the Revue Internationale des Sociétés Secrètes, edited by Monsignor Ewin, published the following lines. Perhaps light will be shed one day on these words of a high Swiss Freemason on the subject of the heir to the throne of Austria. He is a remarkable man. It is a pity that he is condemned. He will die on the steps of the throne. On the 28th June 1914, the Archduke, heir to the crown of the Austrian monarchy, and his wife succumbed to the bullets of Serbian Freemasons. On the 12th October, one of the assassins, Kabranovic, unconcernedly said to the judges of the military court, "In Freemasonry, it is allowed to kill." Such are, in short, the disquieting elements underneath the political crime which let loose the war. Let us briefly recall the facts. The Archduke and Archduchess arrived during an official tour at Sarajevo, a small town of Bosnia-Herzegovina near the Serbian frontier. They were occupying the back seats in a motor car, with General Petirek seated opposite them, and Count Herak beside the chauffeur. The car was proceeding slowly on the Apel Quay along the Miljacka River on its way to the town hall. Distributed among the crowd were 8 assassins armed with bombs and revolvers, of whom the most resolute were Kabranovic, Princip, and Grabez. Opposite the Kamura Bridge, Kabranovic threw his bomb. It fell on the car and then rolled to the ground where it exploded, wounding several persons including the occupants of the car immediately following. The Archduke had his car stopped in order to inquire about the wounded, and then the program arranged upon was continued. When the reception at the town hall was ended, Count Herak placed himself for the return journey standing on the left-hand step of the car so as to protect their highnesses from an attempt upon them from that side. But on this occasion it came from the right. At the corner of Francis Joseph Street, the car stopped just in front of one of the assassins, Princip, who fired at close range several shots from an automatic. Neither the Archduke nor his wife moved, but an instant after, the Archduchess collapsed quietly on her husband's shoulder. Count Herak heard the latter say softly, "Sophie, Sophie, do not die. Live for the sake of our children." He remained quietly seated, supporting the Archduchess. A little blood appeared upon his lips, and, to the question of Count Herak, he repeated several times in a weakening voice, "It is nothing. It is nothing." Then, in his turn, he lost consciousness. The palace of the governor was reached. The 2 bodies were quickly carried to a bed on the first floor, but the doctors who rushed immediately in attendance could only declare that death had already taken place. The drama was at end. It had lasted a few minutes, a few short minutes, which were to shake the world. The crime had germinated in strange minds, which M. Kohler thus describes in the preface of the shorthand report of the trial. It was a purely Russian atmosphere which predominated here, nihilist, anarchist, and terrorist, in conflict with God and with the world, against all established order. Some positive ideas certainly emerged, such as that of the unification of the Serb and Serbo-Croat populations, but these ideas were so indefinite and vague that they led to negative conclusions and finally ended in hatred of Austria and in the determination to destroy this kingdom. It is a wholly Slav Byzantine psychology which one finds here. Violent momentary excitement, dislike of all regular work, alarming mania of destruction, and the poison of revolutionary propaganda would never have produced such results in German or Latin brains. 20 accused persons appeared on the 12th October 1914 before the military court at Sarajevo. 8 were directly concerned in the murder. The 4 most active participants were Princip, Kabranovic, Grabez, and Illich. All were young men from 18 to 20 years old, mostly students. Princip was a Jew. From the interrogation of the accused, it became quite clear that at the beginning, none of them knew exactly whom he wished to kill, nor why he would kill him. They were all agreed upon killing someone, but whom and why seemed to have been quite secondary considerations. In principle, they considered that the Slav populations of Austria-Hungary, and especially those of Bosnia, were being oppressed for the benefit of the German and Hungarian populations, and that it was necessary to make an example. In reality, it seems from their evidence that the true sentiment which actuated them was hatred of the monarchy. All felt instinctively that the strong personality of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand barred the way to revolution, and a common hatred uniting these revolutionaries of various and often opposite tendencies rapidly brought them to agreement. Some passages of the trial are typical of this. The president speaking, "Did you believe that Slavs of southern Austria-Hungary would gain any advantage from your act?" Grabez speaking, "I believed that the southern Slavs, who nearly all pay both money taxes and the blood tax, would obtain at least the most essential rights." The president speaking, "What are then, in your opinion, these most essential rights?" Grabez, "I do not know them very well myself." The president, "Then why use empty phrases?" But, as Princip said frankly, they were all agreed upon the idea of an assassination. Princip speaking, "We were agreed upon the choices of means for helping the southern Slavs." The president, "What were those means?" Princip, "Murder. The disappearance of all those who were opposed to the realization of Pan-Slavia and who are unjust to the people." Behind the Narodna, we have vaguely perceived the influence of international Freemasonry. Certain passages of the interrogations during the trial brought some light on this point. Kabranovic speaking, "He, Kazimirovic, is a Freemason, even in some degree one of their chiefs. He traveled abroad immediately after the men had offered themselves to carry out the assassination. He went to Russia, France, and Budapest. Every time when I asked Siganovic how far our projects had advanced, he replied that I should know when Kazimirovic should return, About this time, Siganovic also told me that the Freemasons had already condemned to death their heir to the throne 2 years ago, but that they had not found men to carry out their judgment. Later, when he gave me the automatic revolver and the cartridges, he said, "That man came back last evening from Budapest. I knew that he had made the journey in connection with our undertaking, and that he had conferred abroad with certain circles." The President speaking, "Are you not simply spinning a yarn?" Kabranovic, "It is the pure truth, and 100 times truer than your Narodna Odbrana documents." At another part of the trial, the defending counsel, Premusic, speaking to Kabranovic, asking the following question: "Have you read the books of Rosic?" Kabranovic speaking, "I have read his treatise on Freemasonry." Premusic speaking, "Were these books distributed in Belgrade?" Kabranovic, "I set them in type as a printer." Premusic, "Tell me, do you believe in God or anything?" Kabranovic, "No." Premusic, "Are you a Mason?" Kabranovic, confused after a moment's silence, and then speaking loudly, "Why do you ask me that? I cannot answer you on the subject." Premusic, "Is Tenkosik a Mason?" Kabranovic, again after silence, "Yes, and Siganovic also." The President now speaking, "From which it follows that you also are a Mason, for a Freemason never admits to anyone but another Mason that he belongs to that society." Kabranovic, "Please do not ask me about that subject, for I shall not reply." There is yet another passage in the trial. The President speaking, "Tell me something more about the motives. Did you know before deciding to attempt the assassination that Tenkosik and Siganovic were Freemasons? Had the fact of you and they being Freemasons an influence on your resolve?" Kabranovic, "Yes." The President, "Did you receive from them the mission to carry out the assassination?" Kabranovic, "I received from no one the mission to carry out the assassination. Freemasonry had to do with it because it strengthened me in my intention. In Freemasonry, it is permitted to kill. Siganovic told me that the Freemasons had condemned to death the Archduke Franz Ferdinand more than a year before." The President, "Did he tell you that from the very beginning, or only after you spoke to him of your wish to carry out the assassination?" Kabranovic, "We had already spoken about Freemasonry, but he said nothing to me of the condemnation to death before we had quite decided to carry out the assassination." The following passage is from the interrogation of Princip, who fired the fatal shots at the Archduke. The President, "Did you speak about Freemasonry with Siganovic?" Princip, insolently speaking, "Why ask me that?" The President, "I ask because I must know. Did you speak to him about it or not?" Princip, "Yes. Siganovic told me that he was a Freemason." The President, "When did he tell you that?" Princip, "He told me when I was asking about the means of carrying out the assassination. He added that he would speak with a certain person and that he would receive the necessary means. On another occasion, he told me that the heir to the throne had been condemned to death in a Masonic lodge." The President, "Are you also a Freemason?" Princip, "Why that question? I shall not reply. And then after a short silence, no. The president is Kabranovic, a Mason. Princip? I do not know. Perhaps he is. He told me once that he was going to join the lodge. In the tempest of the war, this trial passed unnoticed. The silence of the press was perhaps not entirely due to chance. It was in the interests of many people that there should be silence, and there are means to obtain it. But the war is over, and since then some curious persons, or simply people who love their country, have not been satisfied with the explanations given. Thus, recently, one of them has brought forward some new light on the subject, and the importance of his personality gives weight to his words. This person is Ludendorff, former general commanding-in-chief of the German armies. Here is the translation of the principal passages, leaving aside those which are of interest only to the Germans. The Freemason, Kothner, of the Grand Territorial Lodge of Germany had, on the 28th October 1911, at 11:15 a.m., a long conversation with the Grand Master of the Order, Count Dona Schlodian, in the apartment of the Order of this Masonic great power, 12 Eisenacher Strasse, Berlin. He spoke to him in the embrasure of the window and, according to his own words, communicated what follows. Being at first frank and credulous, I made some discoveries during the year 1911 in the lodges of other towns abroad, which disturbed me greatly. I came by chance upon proofs that Freemasonry was preparing something terrible against Germany. I overheard certain imprudent remarks which gave me a glimpse of the plan to assassinate the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, of the World War, and of the fall of thrones and altars, and of all that has since happened. Upon this terrible discovery, I went to the only competent person, the Grand Master Count Dona Schlodian, and told him what I had heard with my own ears and seen with my own eyes. But he seemed not to hear. This conversation, which ought to have led to a decisive rupture with all the grand lodges abroad and some lodges at Rome, these also were part of the fraternal chain of the conspirators against Germany, ended on the categorical reply of the Grand Master, "There is only one Freemasonry." The Grand Territorial Lodge of Germany, under the Grand Master, Dr. Mullendorf, tried by every means to force Herr Kothner to retract the admission of this conversation, but his historic declarations shows, in a gleam of light to the lay world, the crimes and interrelations of Masonry. The Mason, Kothner, has indeed retracted all that he could, except only the above declaration, which he expressly maintained in a letter addressed in the year 1926 to the Grand Master Dr. Mullendorf. He stresses that he made a communication to Count Dona, which ought to have given him clear proof that the Freemasons of the Grand Hungarian Recognized Lodge had exercised criminal activity against Germany and against all the peoples. Regarding the conduct of the Mason Count Dona, who, following upon the communication made to him, took no steps to inform the government and the German people, the Mason Kothner adds that his official Grand Master Count Dona protected the Jewish Freemasons, was obliged to protect them, held by some international tie unknown to me. The Mason, Kothner, had also entrusted his brother-in-law, Major Kohler, since killed in the war, with the task of transmitting this communication to the General Staff of the Army. It never reached me. Elsewhere, Count Cernan relates in his book, Immoral Krieg in the World War, the Archduke knew quite well that the risk of an attempt on his life was imminent. A year before the war, he informed me that the Freemason had resolved his death. He also told me the town where that decision was said to have been taken. I have since forgotten it, and mentioned the names of several Hungarian and Austrian politicians who probably knew something about it. Such are the facts. It may be said that these predictions were written after the event, that these proofs are from a German, and therefore interested source, and that Ludendorff is an exalté. But Ludendorff is not the only one who has spoken. Kabrinovic was not a German. He who said, in Freemasonry, it is allowed to kill, and whatever may be said, nothing can efface that short sentence written in Paris on the 15th September 1912. He is a remarkable man. It is a pity he is condemned. He will die on the steps of the throne. Freemasonry against central monarchies. At the International Congress of Freemasonry at Paris in April 1917, one of the subjects of the deliberation was, how can a strong movement be provoked in Germany against the monarchy, since the basis of peace must be the deposition of William II and Charles I? All the papers at once expressed this idea in every shape and form. Peace cannot be concluded before William II and Charles I are deposed. In his declaration of war, the Freemason, Wilson, solemnly announced to the American Congress that the war was against the German government only, and not against the German people. All this agrees with the line of conduct formulated at the Masonic Conference at Lisbon, the 13th May, 1917, by the Grand Master, Magalhães Lima. The victory of the Allies must be the triumph of Masonic principles. The Masonic War. Masonic newspapers said several times that the war was a Masonic war having for its aim the triumph of the Masonic ideas. According to Vicompte, the Freemason contained the following passage. Already during the first weeks of the war, a great Masonic meeting held in the United States passed a resolution to give to Great Britain and her allies all possible support in the present war. From May 17, on page 601. The same newspaper said further, Freemasonry comprises more than 2 million members. Every American Mason knows very well what that means for the safety and duration of the Republic. The World War is the struggle of democracy against autocracy, and the future of the world will be democratic, whether the German Kaiser knows it or not. These two quotations coming from a German writer may be accepted cautiously, but they are fully corroborated by the following one. A. Leby, a French Masonic authority, said in Paris, the question is to know which is right, good faith or falsehood, good or evil, liberty or autocracy. The present struggle is the continuation of that which began in 1789. One of the two principles must triumph or perish. The very life of the world is at stake. Is humanity able and worthy to live free, or, on the contrary, does its destiny condemn it to servitude? That is the dilemma which the catastrophe has brought us to solve, and all Democrats have given their reply. There is only one way, neither to retreat nor come to terms. During a war so clearly defined and so plain, no one can hesitate as to his duty. Not to defend the motherland would be to surrender the republic. Motherland, republic. The revolutionary spirit and socialism are indissolubly joined. It is time that the rights of the peoples should consummate the rights of man, and in the heart of the battle, it is indeed the living idea of the free union of human beings, which is striving against the dead idea of feudal, murderous, and sterile despotism. Towards the end of the war, the revolution in the interior of Germany was being actively prepared. The Social Democrat Vader, speaking at Magdeburg during a meeting of a workmen's and soldiers' council, made clear the manner in which that preparation was effected. Since 25th January 1918, we have methodically prepared the revolution. It was a difficult task and full of danger. We paid for it by many years of prison. The Social Democratic Party has seen that great strikes do not lead to revolution and that it is necessary to use other means to that end. The labor has brought its fruit. We organized desertions at the front. We provided the deserters with false papers, money, and propaganda leaflets inciting to desertion. We sent our agents in all directions, principally to the front, in order that they might work upon the soldiers and disintegrate the army. They advised soldiers to desert to the enemy, and it is thus that the downfall was brought about, little by little, but with certainty. To sum up then, under the fiery proclamations about the war of right, of liberty, and of civilization, the true aim was to overthrow monarchies, the degradation of the Catholic powers, and the triumph of the Revolution. Now that this triumph seems at hand, it is useless to conceal it, and Mr. Coolidge, late President of the United States of America, publicly recognized it in a speech at Hammond in the 14th June 1927 when he said, "The chief question at stake in this formidable conflict was to decide which form of government was to predominate among the great nations of the world, the autocratic form or the republican form. Victory remained finally on the side of the people." From Reuters, London, 14 June 1927. Conclusion. What Freemasonry really is. We have seen what Freemasonry is in appearance. Moreover, we have seen its revolutionary part in the world. Enlightened by the lesson of the facts and by the Masonic documents which we have published, we can consequently set forth what Masonry really is. In appearance, it is a secret society, philanthropic and humanitarian. In contradiction with this, we have demonstrated the revolutionary work of Freemasonry in the world. We have still to explain the organization of Freemasonry and to summarize what Freemasonry really is, its origin, aim, methods of procedure, real organization, and its directing influences. Organization of Freemasonry. 1. The origin of Freemasonry. Its origin is not definite. It has been connected by some writers with older secret societies as far back as the Kabbalist Jews of Egypt. It is only known to exist with certainty in its present form from 1717, which is the date of Anderson's constitutions upon which are based all Masonic constitutions. 2. Aim of Freemasonry. The aim of Freemasonry is to change the present civilization, which is essentially Christian, to set in its place a Masonic world based on atheist rationalism. The aim of Freemasonry has never varied in spite of apparent contradiction in time and place, but it is so vast that it only advances by progressive stages. Each Masonic section accomplishes its own part, which is different and even in appearance contradictory according to the times, circumstances, countries, and various Masonic groups. Let us say at the beginning that it would be a mistake to believe that all Freemasons know explicitly the work in which they are collaborating. This knowledge is not given completely even to the initiates of the high degrees, even to those of the inner lodges. Each one, or rather each group, does the work assigned to them in the appointed place among princes and clergy, politicians and civil servants, journalists and teachers, magistrates and officers, and among the masses. But, while accomplishing the task imposed on them, the individual and the group remain ignorant of the place which the particular work in which they are engaged occupies in the general scheme, for they do not see the entire plan. Thus it was that until the World War, Freemasonry was in appearance religious and respectful of established order in certain countries of Central Europe. This for two reasons. It would not have been tolerated if it had been openly subversive. Not being able to overthrow the Christian world at a single blow, Masonry proceeds by degrees, the first consisting in allying itself with Protestant countries against the Catholic nations, which are stronger thanks to the unity of Roman direction. It is already beginning to turn against its former allies in certain countries. Furthermore, the work of duplicity is double. While certain Masonic lodges are apparently conservative and respect the established order, behind this camouflage, the inner lodges work secretly for the propagation and triumph of revolutionary ideas. It was thus in France at the eve of the Revolution in 1789, in Central Europe before the 1918 Revolution. Present civilization is based on Christian principles, and so the deeper meaning of the struggle is religious. It is a conflict between God and man led by reason alone. M. Allard, professor of the history of the Revolution at the Sorbonne, has said, "It is absurd to continue to say we do not want to destroy religion, when we are obliged to admit, moreover, that this destruction is indispensable in order to found rationally the new political and social city. Let us then say no longer, we do not want to destroy religion. Let us say, on the contrary, we wish to destroy religion in order to establish the new city in its place." At the International Masonic Congress held in Paris to celebrate the centenary of the French Revolution, the Freemason Franklin, orator of the Grand Orient, spoke thus: "The day will come when among the peoples who have not had an 18th century nor a 1789, monarchies and religions will collapse. That day is not far off, and we are expecting it. That day will bring about the Masonic Universal Fraternity of Peoples, the idea which we set up for ourselves. It is our business to hasten its coming. It may then be concluded from this that Freemasonry and the revolutionary movements have a definite destructive program, for the realization of which they are straining by every means, not without success, but that their program of reconstruction is vague and doomed to utter failure." 3. The method of procedure of Freemasonry. The great task of Freemasonry is to spread ideas sometimes noble and beautiful in appearance, but in reality destructive, of which the prototype is the famous motto, liberty, equality, fraternity. Masonry, a vast organism of propaganda, acts by slow suggestion, spreading the revolutionary ferment in an industrious manner. The heads sow it among the inner lodges. These transmit it to the lower lodges, whence it penetrates into the affiliated institutions and into the press, which takes in hand to the public. Tirelessly, and during the necessary number of years, the suggestion, which is more hidden and imperceptible than an order would be, works upon public opinion and fashions it to wish for the reforms from which nations die. In 1789 and 1848, Freemasonry, in its momentary command of power, failed in its supreme endeavor. Taught by these experiences, its progress has become slower and surer. When once the revolutionary preparation is obtained and judged sufficient, Masonry leaves the field to the militant organizations, Carbonari, Bolshevists, or other open or secret societies, and retires into shadows in the background. There it is not compromised. In case of check, it seems to have remained apart and is all the better able to continue or take up again its work like a gnawing worm, obscure and destroying. Before everything a secret society, Masonry never works in the full light of day. Everyone knows of its existence, its meeting places, and of many of its adepts, but one is ignorant of its real aims, its real means, its real leaders. The immense majority of Masons themselves are in that position. They are only the blind machinery of the sect which they serve from ambitions, politicians or journalists, from self-interest, businessmen, actors, from fanatical conviction, blind and sincere idealists, or from fear. Many honest Masons are so blind that they would be stupefied if they knew for what they are being used. It is secrecy which is the condition of success, and Masonry holds to it above and before everything, being in this respect wonderfully organized. 4. The hidden Masonic organization. As far as can be judged, it is double the administrative organization already described and the hidden organization which is unknown to the great majority of its adepts, everything being done with a view to maintain secrecy. Let us recall that when a Mason is appointed to a higher degree, 1 degree, his appointment is final. 2nd degree, he is chosen by the superior group which calls upon him to join it and is not elected by the suffrages of his equals. 3rd degree, his former lodge companions often remain ignorant of his new dignity, although he continues to mix with them officially. These 3 conditions give the solution of this problem, which is apparently incomprehensible, that of an invisible power, invisibly transmitting its will and exercising invisibly a dominating influence on French politics. This watertight compartment system of degrees makes Freemasonry a superposition of secret societies in which each degree knows of the existence and actions of its own group and of those below it, but is ignorant of all that is going on and being decided in the group immediately above it. A Mason is only chosen after having been watched for a long time and judged worthy of elevation. It is not the leveling principle of universal suffrage which operates, but the autocratic principle of absolute power. As one advances in the Masonic hierarchy, the number of high degrees diminishes, and thus Masonry forms a pyramid of 3 main stages. At the base, it's blue or St. John's Masonry, a sort of depot where those who will form the higher Masonry are examined and chosen, and where they undergo the indispensable Masonic molding. They also form the necessary contacts with the outer world for the diffusion of Masonic ideas. Above this is the Masonry of the high degrees, which, in spite of its name, is only a subordinate Masonry, an indispensable channel to reach the high international Freemasonry with probably a small leading inner circle. It can now be understood how the hidden power is able to transmit its will invisibly in the whole pyramid of Masonic workshops. Indeed, if 2 or 3 members of a superior group, having agreed upon themselves, take part in a meeting of a subordinate group, they can easily get their suggestions adopted. Since their entente is unknown, according to need, they will take the necessary time. It is for this reason that the will is usually transmitted by means of suggestion rather than command, for the latter would risk the discovery and compromising of the immediately superior authority and thereby of the supreme direction. It is only when the hidden authority believes itself strong enough to be immovable that it gives more definite orders through the medium of Freemasonry, as in the case of France today. This superposition of secret societies also explains the extraordinary manner in which secrecy is maintained. The hidden power has succeeded in impressing Masonic brains with a veritable cult of secrecy. This discipline is imposed with absolute rigor from the very first entrance in Freemasonry. It is maintained and renewed at each move upwards. It is recalled to mind again and again, although the great majority of Masons have no secret to betray. A special state of mind is thus created which explains why those Masons who, after long years, reach the really high degrees never betray the order. For the rest, we know little of High Masonry. The Grand Orient and the Grand Lodge of France are lodges of the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd degree. Above this visible Masonry, there is another leading from the 4th to the 14th degree, of which we have the ritual but hardly know anything. We do not know where their meetings take place, how their lodges are named, nor their aims, philosophy, and above all, we do not know their work. It seems that a new cut is made between the 16th and 17th degree, and that from the latter begins the higher Masonry, which reaches the 32nd degree. It is there in all probability that the higher direction is found and international connection maintained. From the 33rd degree, we begin once more to know something of what happens. These are the supreme councils, whose importance may be more apparent than real. Outside of Freemasonry proper, there are many irregular masonries, such as the Illuminati of Vicompte, the Rite of Memphis and of Misraim, the Ordo Templi Orientis, directed by Aleister Crowley, successor of Theodore Roos. Generally, the degrees are priced and can be purchased. There is the Universal Order of the B'nai B'rith. There are great associations which are powerful in wealth and influence, such as the Rosicrucians of California. There is the Theosophy, linked with Masonry, of Mrs. Besant, who works with the Grand Orient. These adepts of all these societies are often illumines, or followers of the occult, ill-balanced minds, but behind these fools there are people to be taken seriously, such as Rudolf Steiner, whose Anthroposophical Society is remarkably organized, a Mason of considerable worth and much superior to the vulgar anti-clerical of the lower lodges. There are little-known sects such as the ancient Cathares, round Albi and Béziers, connected with the Gnostic Catholic Church with its shockingly cynical ritual. In many occult sects, phallic worship is an honor. In a word, there is an extraordinary crop of societies more or less secret and more or less Masonic, of whose existence the public is generally totally ignorant, but whose importance is sometimes very real. They all work more or less in the same general direction, and their main points have been thus summarized in a book called The Nameless Order, as corresponding to the 6 points of the Kabbalistic star. 1. Religious. by philosophy or mysticism or empiric science to undermine and discredit all Christian creed. 2. Ethical. To corrupt morality of northern races with Oriental codes, weaken marriage bonds, destroy family life, abolish inheritance, even heritable names. 3. Atheistic. Cult of the ugly and aberrant in art, literature, music, and drama, modernism, crude Orientalism, degeneracy. 4. Sociological. Abolition of aristocracy, creation of plutocracy, money standard, by vulgar display, extravagance, corruption, to create revolt in proletarian minds, hence class war. 5. Industrial and financial. Having destroyed ideals of craftsmanship and pride in handicraft, set up golden serpent of profit, standardization of cheap and shoddy, centralization, cartel, and trust, leading to abolition of private ownership and to state monopoly. 6. Political. To kill patriotism and pride of race. In name of progress and evolution, set up internationalism as ideal of human brotherhood. Thus, undermine national unity, weaken all governments, and so prepare the way for their super government, which shall rule the world. The Jewish influence in Freemasonry. What is the directing influence in Freemasonry? Many people answer, the Jewish power. Here we enter upon a forbidden subject on which it is prohibited to touch, for the Jewish question is closely linked with the Masonic question. At the present time, Jews and Freemasons are working in collaboration throughout the whole world for the triumph of the universal revolution. The high Masonic posts are for the most part held by Jews in various countries. There are lodges which are exclusively Jewish, such as the notorious Masonic Order of B'nai B'rith, whose headquarters are in Chicago. The Jewish spirit dominates Masonry and imprints upon it that anti-Christian hatred, the fierceness of which would otherwise be difficult to explain. Masonry everywhere upholds and defends Jewish interests. From whence does this alliance date? 2 theories are afoot. One, the theory of Gugno de Massou and Copen Abencelli, etc., is that the Jews have entirely created Masonry in order to corrupt the nations of Christian civilization and to propagate behind this veil the general revolution which is to bring about the domination of Israel. It is simply a tool and a means in the hands of the Jews. In support of this, we can quote the article of Dr. Isaac M. Wise, published in the Israelite of America, 3rd of August, 1866. Masonry is a Jewish institution whose history, degrees, charges, passwords, and explanations are Jewish from beginning to end. The other theory, Webster, Weichtel, etc., is Freemasonry was a good and sound institution in principle, but revolutionary agitators, principally Jews, taking advantage of its organization as a secret society, penetrated it little by little. They have corrupted it and turned it from its moral and philanthropic aim in order to employ it for revolutionary purposes. This would explain why certain parts of Freemasonry have remained intact, such as English Masonry. In support of this theory, we may quote that what a Jew, Bernard Lazare, has said in his book, L'Antisémitisme. What were the relations between the Jews and the secret societies? That is not easy to elucidate, for we lack reliable evidence. Obviously, they did not dominate in these associations as the writers, whom I have just mentioned, pretend. They were not necessarily the soul, the head, the Grand Master of Masonry, as Gougenot de Moussu affirms. It is certain, however, that there were Jews in the very cradle of Masonry, Kabbalistic Jews, as some of the rites which have been preserved prove. It is most probable that, in the years which preceded the French Revolution, they entered the councils of this sect in increasing numbers and founded secret societies themselves. There were Jews with Vicompte and Martinez de Pasqualis, a Jew of Portuguese origin, organized numerous groups of Illuminati in France and recruited many adepts whom he initiated into the dogma of reinstatement. The Martinezist lodges were mystic, while the other Masonic orders were rather rationalist, a fact which permits us to say that the secret societies represented the two sides of Jewish mentality, practical rationalism and pantheism. That pantheism which, although it is a metaphysical reflection of belief in an only God, yet sometimes lends to Kabbalistic theurgy, one could easily show the agreements of these two tendencies. The alliance of Cazotte, of Cagliostro, of Martinez, of St. Martin, of the Comte de Saint-Germain, of Eckartshausen, with the encyclopedists and the Jacobins, and the manner in which, in spite of their opposition, they arrived at the same result, the weakening of Christianity. That will once again serve to prove that the Jews could be good agents of these secret societies, because the doctrines of these societies were in agreement with their own doctrines, but not that they were the originators of them. Both sides bring argument in support of their respective theories, which may be summed up as follows. The first theory: Occidental people of Christian civilization would have been incapable of this creation, for the secret society is the manifestation of an Oriental and anti-Christian mentality, and the perfection of Masonic organization proves that its founders had great experiences of secret societies. The universality of Freemasonry, its duration, its finity of aim, which can be explained if it is Jewish and serving Jewish interests, becomes incomprehensible if it is of Christian origin. The very aim of Freemasonry, the destruction of Christian civilization, reveals the Jew, for he alone can gain from it, and he alone is actuated by a sufficiently violent hatred against Christianity to be capable of this creation. Second theory: the principal argument of its partisans is that history does not show the Jews in the beginning of Freemasonry, that they only appear in it about the first third of the 19th century, and at that time did not yet play an original part in it. In any case, the question has mainly a retrospective interest. What concerns us is the present result. How it was achieved is a secondary consideration. The actual result is not doubtful. Judeo-Masonry is at the head of the revolutionary movement, and the preponderance of Jewish influence in Freemasonry is for many is demonstrated by reason, by Jewish assertions and facts. Jewish influence demonstrated. 1. By reason. The chief argument may thus be summed up. Freemasonry is a secret society. It is directed by an international minority. It has sworn implacable hatred to Christianity. These three characteristic features are the very ones which characterize Jewry, which would prove that Jews are the directing element of the lodge. Only the Jews have anything to gain from the aim of Masonry. These occult societies have definitively no other real aim but that of the Judaic associations, of which they are only a variant with a semi-Christian physiognomy. For the thought which directs them is the same, and we knew it before an accident had revealed the correspondence of Nebius with Piccolo Tigre, for all their labor is limited to, all their activity applied to, and expended in the propagation and hatching out of ideas and facts which must mean the annihilation of the doctrine of Christ in Christian societies. In other words, the sole aim of their efforts is the realization of the triumph of Judaic ideas, proclaimed under the name of modern principles by Israel itself, and of which the consequence is the Masonic age, which they summon in their prayers. Arthur Pruss, an American writer, has shown in his work, A Study in American Freemasonry, the close affinities between Masonry and the Jewish Kabbalah. These may be summed up in the following quotation from the celebrated Mason Albert Pike. All true dogmatical religions come from the Kabbalah and lead back to it. All that is scientific and great in the religious dreams of all the illuminated, such as Jacob Bohm, Swedenborg, St. Martin, and others similar, is borrowed from the Kabbalah. All the Masonic associations owe their secrets and symbols to it. By Jewish affirmation, let us recall the words of Dr. Isaac M. Wise. Freemasonry is a Jewish institution. The Jewish World wrote, "In the face of it, how could they, the Freemasons, honor King Solomon and reproach one of their own day for having the same blood in his veins as had the king? Regard for King Solomon surely should teach them to regard with sympathy all who belong to the nation of which he was the glorious head. We hope that this will tend to put an end to any boycotting of Jews by Freemasons. It is strange it should have occurred, seeing how much, as Sir William Rayner hinted, Freemasonry owes to what is essentially Jewish." Already in 1901, the German Mason Findel wrote, "It is less a question of a struggle for the interests of humanity than a struggle for the interests and the domination of Judaism. And, in this struggle, Judaism reveals itself by the dominant power to which Freemasonry must submit. Indeed, we should not be astonished by this, for, in a hidden and carefully disguised manner, Judaism is already, in fact, the dominating power in many a great lodge of Europe. So far as Germany is concerned, it must not be forgotten that it is master of the financial and commercial markets, master of the press, both political and Masonic, and that millions of Germans are financially its debtors. By the facts. To show in detail the preponderance of Jewish influence in Freemasonry would be to write the history of modern Freemasonry and of all recent revolutions. A complete summary of this question would exceed our limits. Let us recall two recent examples: the Bolshevist revolutions in Bavaria and in Hungary. The documents which were thereafter published were seized by the Hungarian government in the archives of the Masonic lodges of Budapest, and their authenticity cannot be doubted. We have already given a summary of them, so it is unnecessary to return to the subject. We shall see further on the part of Judeo-Masonry in the Bolshevist revolution in Bavaria. We can then say with all certainty there is a close alliance between the Freemasons and the Jews, and without our having absolute material proofs of it, which would be difficult to obtain in such a secret manner, there is a collection of facts which tend to prove the Jews as being the directing influence in Freemasonry. So in conclusion, we may quote this passage from N.H. Webster. Behind the concrete forces of revolution, beyond that invisible secret circle which perhaps directs them all, is there not yet another force, still more potent, that must be taken into account? In looking back over the centuries at the dark episodes that have marked the history of the human race from its earliest origins, strange and horrible cults, waves of witchcraft, blasphemies, and desecrations, how it is possible to ignore the existence of an occult power at work in the world. Individuals, sects, or races fired with the desire of world domination have provided the fighting forces of destruction, but behind them are the veritable powers of darkness in eternal conflict with the powers of light. English Freemasonry. We now come to the great point: Anglo-Saxon and specially English Masonry. One quite understands the difficulty which the normal Englishman feels in crediting the reality of the revolutionary and anti-religious tendencies with which continental Freemasonry stands charged. All or nearly all the Masons whom he has personally known have been law-abiding citizens, often churchgoers, often conspicuously charitable, and in general pillars of respectability. Speaking of the vast majority of the lodge members, there is nothing with which they are less in sympathy than subversion of the existing social order or hostility to any form of sincere religion. Most of the members and the official heads are above suspicion, but we would say this: not only are secret societies dangerous, but all societies whose object is mysterious. The whole history of man is proof of this position. In no age or country has there ever appeared a mysterious association which did not, in time, become a public nuisance. The advantages to be derived from Freemasonry are not clearly conspicuous, whilst the dangers are obvious. One never knows where it tends to and who are the effective leaders. The Masonic oath is immoral in principle. It is imposed by an authority which has no adequate sanction, differing in that respect from the oath exacted, for example, by a magistrate, a judge, or an ecclesiastical superior, who are in their varying degrees the representatives of the commonwealth or of God. Again, the scope of the oath regards either secrets that are nowadays no secrets at all, or else secrets which are criminal and contrary to public polity. Thirdly, the manner of the oath-taking is irreverent, and in the extravagance of the penalties invoked, it borders on blasphemous. Fourthly, by the form used, the Mason may be said to pledge himself blindly to anything and everything. He knows not rightly what. He signs a blank check with his left for others to fill in, and though the English apprentice is told beforehand that nothing will be required of him contrary to his allegiance, his country, or his conscience, such assurance is worth little when it comes from those whose view on moral questions may be very different from his own. On the other hand, we can now speak with the authority of experience. The process has been identical in each country of Europe, one after the other. First of all, Freemasonry was loyal, conservative, and not anti-religious. Behind that veil, the revolutionary anti-monarchical and anti-Christian work was being carried on in the inner circles, by and by permeating all Freemasonry and the outside world. It was thus in France before 1789, in Portugal before 1905, in Central Europe before 1918. The Masonic documents published at Budapest are proof of it. What happened in all Europe may possibly befall England too. Would it be an exaggeration to say that this process is now going on in this country? There is a hidden power behind that nameless beast, the revolutionary spirit, which is the secret of his amazing achievements. But it is the very power that the average Englishman refuses to take into account. There are elaborate organizations all over the country for dealing with the Red Peril, but which of these show a vision sufficiently clear to detect the force behind it, or, if detecting, the courage to fight it? Yet, so long as this question is evaded, so long will the beast continue to march forward and triumph. From time immemorial, the Kabbalistic Jews have had their great adepts who have succeeded in their quest for hidden knowledge and mastered certain secrets of nature, and who, having thus acquired occult powers, have used those powers for the furtherance of their own political aims. These aims were carried out in the lodges of Continental Masonry and other secret societies, and we have it on the authority of Disraeli himself that these Jews were found at the head of every one of these. Now, as we have already seen, these occult powers were undoubtedly behind the Illuminized Grand Orient and the French Revolution, also behind Babeuf and his secret successors, the Bolsheviks. The existence of these powers has never been questioned on the continent. The Catholic Church has always recognized the fact and therefore has forbidden her children under pain of excommunication to belong to any order of Freemasonry or to any other secret society. But here in England, men are apt to treat the whole thing with contempt and remind us that, by our own showing, English Masonry is a totally different thing from the Continental insofar as it taboos the discussion of religion and politics in its lodges. That is perfectly true, and no English Mason is permitted to attend a lodge meeting of the Grand Orient or of any other irregular Masonry. But it is none the less true that Thomas Paine, who was in Paris at the time of the Revolution and played an active part in it, returned to this country and established 8 lodges of the Grand Orient and other revolutionary societies. But that is not all. There are occult societies flourishing in England today, such as the Theosophical Society under Mrs. Besant, with its Order of the Star in the East and Order of the Round Table. Both the latter are under the leadership of Krishnamurti, vehicles for the manifestation of the Messiah or world teacher. These are associated with the Continental Masons and claim to be under the direct influence of the Grand Masters or the Great White Lodge, Jewish Kabbalists. Co-Masonry is another branch of Mrs. Besant's Theosophical Society, and in February 1922, the alliance between this and the Grand Orient was celebrated at the Grand Temple of the Droit Humain in Paris. Also, the Steinerites, Anthroposophical Society, which is Rosicrucian and linked with Continental Masonry. Both this and Mrs. Besant's groups aim at the Grand Orient, United States of Europe. But there is another secret society linked to Dr. Steiner's movement, which claims our attention here. The Stella Matutina. This is a Rosicrucian order of Masonry passing as a high and holy order for spiritual development and the service of humanity, but in reality, a politico-pseudo-religious society of occultists studying the highest practical magic. For all this and much more, we refer the reader to the series of articles by Inquire Within, which have appeared in The Patriot. And who are those who belong to the Stella Matutina? English clergymen, church dignitaries, one at least of the above-named red clergy, clerical members of a religious community where young men are being trained for the ministry. The English clergymen and others are doubtless themselves dupes in a directing power unknown to them, as are its ultimate aims. The Stella Matutina had among its members the notorious Aleister Crowley, who, however, was expelled from the London Order. He is an adept and practices magic in its vilest form. He has an order, the OTO, which is at the present time luring many to perdition. The Sunday Express and other papers have exposed this unblushing villainy. Then there is another interesting fact which shows the connection between occultism and communism. In July 1889, the International Workers' Congress was held in Paris, Mrs. Besant being one of the delegates. Concurrently, the Marxists held their International Congress, and Mrs. Besant moved, amid great applause, for amalgamation with them. And yet, another International Congress was then being held in Paris, to wit, that of the Spiritists. The delegates of these occultists were the guests of the Grand Orient, whose headquarters they occupied at 16 Rue Cadet. The president of the Spiritualists was Dennis, and he has made it quite clear that the three congresses there came to a mutual understanding, for, in a speech which he afterwards delivered, he said, "The occult powers are at work among men. Spiritism is a powerful germ which will develop and bring about transformation of laws, ideas, and of social forces. It will show its powerful influence on social economy and public life." All this tends to prove that relations between continental Freemasonry and English secret societies, including Freemasonry, are more intimate and extensive than it appears at first. In an article published in the January-February number of the Bulletin de la Grande Loge de France, concerning the French edition of this book, a well-known Freemason, Albert Lantuyon, mentioning my opinion on the subject, added, "The English brothers, and the nation, by the way, are shut off from continental influences, but it will probably be through the lodges that the penetration of our ideas will be more easily accomplished. Will it be for good? Will it be for evil? On this point our opinion differs from that of the author, but for the present it is the fact itself indicated by Mr. de Poncins, which is worth our meditation." On the other hand, what applies to England is not so true for America. We have quoted page 70, the article from the Latomia, showing the intervention of the United States government in favor of Hungarian Freemasonry. It is commonly reported in Central Europe that English Masonry made then a move in the same sense. One of the following numbers of the same Masonic papers accounts of a German Freemasonry who declared that he had benefited from special treatment once he had made known that he was a Mason, when he was prisoner of war in the American Army. Similar instances could certainly be multiplied. When we look back upon some dark page of history, some grave crisis which left its legacy of shame and trouble for long years after, we marvel at the blindness and apathy of people of that day and their criminal shirking of a grave responsibility to posterity. Could not they see what was taking place around them? Could not they realize that nothing short of heroic effort and self-sacrifice could save the situation and avert catastrophe? But instead of indulging in useless retrospect, suppose we open our eyes to current events and, noting the danger ahead, stir ourselves to action, lest those who come after us shall have cause to marvel, in their turn, that we can amuse ourselves with fiddling while Rome was burning, and so leave them to inherit but the ruins of a once glorious empire. Second part, Judaism. Introduction to the Jewish question. The study of revolutionary movements has brought us to Freemasonry. The study of Freemasonry has led us to the Jews. The Jewish question is very complex. We shall deal with it as follows. 1. The statement of the problem. 2. The revolutionary part played by the Jews in the world. 3. The organization of Judaism. 4. Conclusion. The statement of the problem. Judaism is intimately connected with the international revolutionary movement, which shows itself in various forms throughout the world. Let us examine, then, the part of Jewish influence in the modern world in general, and particularly in the revolutions of our time. Insoluble enigma, more than 2,000 years old, the Jewish problem is one of the most formidable which the future lays before us. In order to attempt to solve it, and perhaps again in vain, it is necessary at least to try to become acquainted with its rudiments. Words corroborated by those of a Jew, Mr. Oscar Levy. There is no race in the world more enigmatic, more fatal, and therefore more interesting than the Jews. Every writer who, like yourself, is oppressed by the aspect of the present and embarrassed by his anxiety for the future must try to elucidate the Jewish question and its bearing upon our age. For the question of the Jews and their influence on the world past and present cuts to the root of all things and should be discussed by every honest thinker, however bristling with difficulties it is, however complex the subject as well as the individuals of this race may be. First part, the revolutionary part of the Jews in the world. Jews in modern revolutions. Amongst the spectacles to which the 20th century invites us must be counted the final settlement of the destiny of European Jews. There is every evidence that, now that they have cast their dice and crossed their Rubicon, there only remains for them to become masters of Europe or to lose Europe, as they lost Egypt in old times, when they had placed themselves in a similar position, that from Nietzsche. There is a profound antagonism between Jews and non-Jews, antagonism both spiritual and racial, arising from a radically different conception of life, antagonism deeper than is realized by those who see only its outward manifestations. Scattered and rendered powerless for 2,000 years, the Jews have always been bitter revolutionaries, and thus we find them taking part in all modern revolutions, of which they are the most active directing element. The part of the Jews in the French Revolution of 1789 was not evident. That was perhaps unnecessary. Freemasonry was doing the work and serving as a cloak. We have only a few glimpses of it. The 300 Masons of the Constituent Assembly struggle with the fierce energy and return to the charge 14 times in order to obtain for the Jews the right of citizenship. While studying Freemasonry, we have seen the Jew at work in all the secret societies which promote revolutions. As a general rule, where Freemasonry is active, he does not appear, for he does not care to work openly. From 1848, their influence becomes more and more visible in European revolutions. The Prime Minister of Great Britain, the Jew Disraeli, declares that it is they who are the promoters of the movement. The world is governed by very different personages to what is imagined by those who are not behind the scenes. What mighty revolution which is at the moment preparing in Germany, and which will be, in fact, a second and greater Reformation, and of which so little is yet known in England, is developing entirely under the auspices of the Jews. And elsewhere, One can trace Jewish influence in the last revolutionary explosions in Europe. An insurrection has taken place against traditions, religion, and property, the destruction of the Semitic principle, the extirpation of the Jewish religion, either under its Mosaic or Christian form. The natural equality of men and the annulment of property are proclaimed by the secret societies which form the provisional government, and men of Jewish race are found at the head of each of them. The people of God cooperate with atheists. The most ardent accumulators of property link themselves with communists. The select and chosen race walks hand in hand with the scum of the lower castes of Europe. And all this because they wish to destroy this Christianity, which owes them its very name, and whose tyranny they can no longer bear. These words are corroborated by those of Bernard Lazare. During the Second Revolutionary Period, which began in 1830, they showed even more fervor than during the first. They were moreover directly concerned for, in the majority of European states, they did not enjoy full civic rights. Even those among them who were not revolutionaries by reason or by temperament were such by self-interest. In working for the triumph of liberalism, they were working for themselves. There is no doubt that by their gold, their energy, their ability, they supported and assisted the European Revolution. During those years, their bankers, their industrial magnates, their poets, their writers, their demagogues, prompted by very different ideas, moreover, strove for the same end. We find them taking part in the movement of Young Germany. They were numerous in their secret societies, which formed the ranks of the militant revolution, in the Masonic lodges, in the groups of Carbonaria, in the Roman Haute Vente, everywhere, in France, in Germany, in Switzerland, in Austria, in Italy. It would be too long to follow in detail the part of the Jews in all modern revolutions. It was particularly apparent in Russia. Freemasonry being forbidden there, they were obliged to carry out the work themselves. The great revolutionary onslaught which swept Europe at the end of the war was led by Jews. They were the leaders. Their bands were taken from the dregs of the working class, eager for plunder, and amongst idealists who allowed themselves to be deceived by their clever propaganda. Like the German Spartacism, Bolshevism in Hungary was a Judeo-Masonic movement. Official Hungarian documents give irrefutable proofs. On the 22nd March 1918, the Hungarian Soviet Republic was established. Its heads were Freemasons, e.g., the Minister of Public Instruction, Brother Kunze or Kohn, Brother Jassy, National Minister of the Soviets, Brother Augustin Peter, Brother Lukaz, son of a Jewish millionaire of Budapest, Brother Daner, Denz Zoltan, and above all, Brother Bela Kun, or Kohn, a criminal of the first order who still enjoys the special protection of the Austrian government. The government of the Soviets was composed of Jews. Let us give here the names of the best known so that the memory of them may for long remain. The bloodthirsty Tibor Semuli, the Prime Minister of the government, Alexander Garbai, Joseph Pogani for the army, Ronai or Rosentangle for justice, Varga or Weichselbaum for finance, Vince or Weinstein as governor of the capital, Moritz Erdelyi or Einstein, Deso Biro or Bienenstock number 2 for the police, all Jews except Garbai. Elsewhere, J. Thurod wrote, with him, Bela Kun, 26 commissaries composed the new government. Out of the 26 commissaries, 18 belonged to Israel. An unheard of proportion if one considers that in Hungary there were altogether 1.5 million Jews in a population of 22 million. Add to this that these 18 commissaries had in their hands the effective direction of government. The 8 Christian commissaries were only Confederates. In a few weeks, Bellakun and his friends had overthrown in Hungary the age-old order, and one saw rising on their banks of the Danube a new Jerusalem, issued from the brain of Karl Marx and built by Jewish hands on ancient thoughts. For hundreds of years, through all misfortunes, a messianic dream of an ideal city where there will be neither rich nor poor, and where perfect justice and equality will reign, has never ceased to haunt the imagination of the Jew, and their ghettos, filled with the dust of ancient dreams, the uncultured Jews of Galicia persist in watching on moonlight nights in the depths of the sky for some sign precursor of the coming of the Messiah. Trotsky, Bellakun, and the others took up in their turn this fabulous dream. But, tired of seeking in heaven this kingdom of God which never comes, they have caused it to descend upon the earth. Experience has shown that their ancient prophets were better inspired in placing it in the clouds. The testimony of a neutral may be quoted in the following extract from a report on revolutionary activities published by a committee of the legislature of New York, presided over by Senator Lusk. There was no opposition organized against Bellakun. Like Lenin, he surrounded himself with commissaries having absolute authority. Of the 32 principal commissaries, 25 were Jews, a proportion nearly similar to that in Russia. The most important of them formed a directory of 5: Bellakun, alias Kohn, Bella Vaga, or Weiss, Joseph Pogany, or Schwartz, Sigismund Kunfi, or Kunstatter, and another. Other chiefs were Alpari and Semuli, who directed the Red Terror, as well as the executions and tortures of the bourgeoisie. The same report publishes a list of 76 men prosecuted in America by the Committee as criminal anarchists at the beginning of 1920, and of whom the immense majority bear Jewish names. The Jewish preponderance in the German revolutions of 1918 is not less irrefutable. There, as elsewhere, they are directors and strategists of the movement. The Soviet Republic of Munich was Jewish. It is sufficient to mention some other names of leaders: Liebknecht, Rosa Luxemburg, Kurt Eisner, and many others. On the fall of the imperial government, the Jews at a single stroke and en masse seized the control of the country. The new German cabinet was dominated by the Jews Haas, for foreign affairs, and Landberg. The former had as assistants the Jews Kautsky, Alzek, who in 1918 was not even a German citizen, and the Jews Kohn and Herzfeld. The Jew Schiffer was Minister of Finance, assisted by Bernstein. The Jew Preuss, assisted by the Jew Dr. Freund, occupied the Secretariat of the Interior. It was the same in the Kingdom of Prussia. The Jew Rosenfeld was at the head of the Ministry of Justice, which was entirely staffed by Jews and directed by them. Hirsch had the Ministry of Interior, and Sim was in charge of finance. The Jews Lipinski and Schwartz were the soul of the government of Saxony. The Jews Thalheimer and Hyman governed in Württemberg, Fulda in Hesse, It is superfluous to recall the part played by President of the Bavarian Soviet Republic, the Jew Kurt Eisner, chief of the Bolshevist Revolution in Munich. 11 small men have made the revolution, said Kurt Eisner in the intoxication of triumph to his colleague, the minister Auer. It seems only just to preserve a lasting memory of these small men. They are the Jews Max Lowenberg, Dr. Kurt Rosenfeld, Kaspar Wollheim, Max Rothschild, Karl Arnold, Kranold, Rosenheck, Berenbaum, Rees, and Kaiser. These 10 men with Kurt Eisner van Israelovich were at the head of the Revolutionary Tribunal of Germany. All the 11 are Freemasons and belong to the Secret Lodge number 11, which had its abode at Munich, number 51, Brennerstrasse. It was the same in nearly all the branches of the German administration. Thus, the chiefs of police of Berlin, Frankfurt, Munich, Essen were respectively the Jews Ernst, Sinsheimer, Steiner, Levy. The various branches of these soldiers and workmen's committees were directed by the Jews Cohen, Stern, Lowenberg, Frankel, Israelovich, Laubenheim, Silligson, Kotstein, Laufenberg, Hyman, Schlesinger, Merz, Weil. German public opinion accuses them of being the cause of the overthrow of German social order by the spirit of Bolshevism, by the press, and by the Jewish control of the supplies and industry of the country. So, in fact, of the violence of public reaction and, it would appear, acting on instructions, the Jews abandoned in course of time the principal posts in view in the government, but without relaxing anything of their hold on the real power, finance, the press, etc. Judaism does not care to appear in the full light of day, and if it can effectively control government, it willingly allows it to remain in the hands of the nationals of each country. It only enters into a struggle against a nation or a government when these prevent it controlling and exploiting the country. Under these circumstances, it has boasted of being able to make at will war or peace, and of holding in its hands the reins of world power, of being able to make revolution or to restore order. In case of obstinate resistance, it can let loose Bolshevism. Russia was one of these obstinate cases, hence the Bolshevist Revolution, in which the Jewish race appeared at last in the full light of day. The Jews and Bolshevism. An enormous amount of labor has everywhere been expended in attempting to minimize the part played by the Jews in Bolshevism. Unfortunately, the facts are there. There is no lack, moreover, of Jewish assertions on the subject. That these are not generally destined to come to public notice takes away nothing from their value. On the contrary, here are some. The Jewish World of the 10-129 wrote, "This reminds me of what Mentor, writing in the Jewish Chronicle in the time of the Russian Revolution, said on the same subject. Indeed, in effect, it was the same as what Mr. Cox now says. After showing that Bolshevism, by reason or the ruthless tyranny of its adherents, was a serious menace to civilization, Mentor observed, yet, nonetheless, in essence, it is the revolt of peoples against the social state, against the evil, the iniquities that were crowded by the cataclysm of the war under which the world groaned for 4 years. And he continued, there is much in the fact of Bolshevism itself, in the fact that so many Jews are Bolshevists, in the fact that the ideals of Bolshevism at many points are consonant with the finest ideals of Judaism, some of which went to form the basis of the last teachings of the founder of Christianity. These are things which the thoughtful Jew will examine carefully. The Jewish Chronicle in 1920 published a manifesto by Israel Zangwill, an important Jewish writer, in which he exalts the glories of the race in which has produced a Beaconsfield, a Reading, a Montague, a Kurt Eisner, a Trotsky. Mr. Zangwill, in his immense Semitic enthusiasm, has brought together in the same category the Jews of the English government, the Jews of Hungary, and the Bolshevist Jews. What is the difference? All are Jews, and all are equally an honor and a benefit to their race. Rabbi J. L. Magnus, speaking in New York in 1919, pronounced these words: when the Jew applies his thought, his whole soul to the cause of the workers and the despoiled, of the disinherited of this world, his fundamental quality is that he goes to the root of things. In Germany, he becomes a Marx and a Lassalle, a Haas, and an Edward Bernstein. In Austria, Victor Adler, Friedrich Adler. In Russia, Trotsky. Compare for an instant the present situation in Germany and Russia. The revolution there has liberated creative forces, and admire the quantity of Jews who were there ready for active and immediate service. Revolutionaries, socialists, Mensheviks, Bolsheviks, majority or minority socialists, whatever name one assigns to them, all are Jews, and one finds them as the chiefs of the workers in all revolutionary parties. M. Cohen, in the Communist of Kharkov in April 1919, has said, one can say without exaggeration that the great Russian social revolution has been made by the hand of the Jews. Would the somber, oppressed masses of Russian workmen and peasants have been capable by themselves of throwing off the yoke of the bourgeoisie? No, it was especially the Jews who have led the Russian proletariat to the dawn of the International, and who have not only guided but still guide today the cause of the Soviets, which they have preserved in their hands. We can sleep in peace so long as the commander-in-chief of the Red Army is Comrade Trotsky. It is true that there are no Jews in the Red Army serving as private soldiers, but the committees in Soviet organizations are Jewish. Jews bravely lead to victory the masses of the Russian proletariat. It is not without reason that in these elections for all the Soviet institutions, Jews are in a victorious and crushing majority. The Jewish symbol, for which centuries has struggled against capitalism, Christian, has become that also of the Russian proletariat. One may see it in the adoption of the red five-pointed star, which has been for so long, as one knows, the symbol of Zionism and Judaism. Behind this emblem marches victory, the death of parasites and of the bourgeoisie. Elsewhere, an English white book has published the following passage, number 6, Sir M. Findlay to Mr. Balfour, Christiana, 17 September 1918. I consider that the immediate suppression of Bolshevism is the greatest issue now before the world, not even excluding the war which is still raging, and unless, as above stated, Bolshevism is nipped in the bud immediately, it is bound to spread in one form or another over Europe and the whole world, as it is organized and worked by Jews who have no nationality and whose one object is to destroy for their own ends the existing orders of things. The only manner in which this danger could be averted would be collective action on the part of all powers. Following upon these affirmative texts, let us add some facts. The complete list of the higher Soviet officials has been published in detail, notably by the Association, Unity of Russia, 121 East 7th Street, New York, 1920. The question, who governs Russia, receives a categorical reply in the simple enumeration of the responsible officials of the irresponsible Soviet government. The data contained in this pamphlet has been carefully taken from the Bolshevist official organs such as Istvestia Golos Truda, the Red Gazette, and others. The fundamental fact is incontestable. The Soviet bureaucracy is almost entirely in the hands of Jews and Jewesses, whilst the number of Russians who participate in the government of the Soviets is ridiculously small. It is impossible to evade this fact, which stands as a solemn warning to countries and states which claim to be Christian and which believe in national modes of existence, in contradiction with the unlimited internationalism in which the Jewish nation is the dominant power. This list is too long to give in full. The following is a summary. The Council of People's Commissaries. Members 22. Jews 17. Percentage 77.2. Commissariat of War. Members 43. Jews 33. Percentage 76.7. Commissariat of Foreign Affairs. Members 16. Jews 13. Percentage 81.2. Finance. Members 30. Jews 24. Percentage 80. Justice 21. Jews 20. Percentage 95. Public Instruction. Members 53. Jews 42. Percentage 79.2. Social Assistance. Members 6. Jews 6. Percentage 100. Labor. Members 8. Jews 7. Percentage 87.5. Bolshevist Red Cross at Vienna, Berlin, Warsaw, Bucharest. Members 8. Jews 8. Percentage 100. Provincial Commissaries 23. Jews 21. Percentage 91. Journalists. Members 41. Jews 41. 100%. Here, on the other hand, is the list of the High Commissaries of the People, 1919. Alias Lenin. Real name Ulyanov, a Russian of Jewish mother. Alias Trotsky. Real name Bronstein, Jew. Alias Steklov. Real name Nakamres, Jew. Alias Martov, real name Zaderbaum, Jew. Alias Gusiev, real name Propkine, Jew. Alias Kamenev, real name Rosenfeld, Jew. Alias Sukhanov, real name Gimmer, Jew. Alias Legeski, real name Krokman, Jew. Alias Bogdanov, real name Silberstein, Jew. Alias Gorev, real name Goldman, Jew. Alias Orutsky, real name Rada Meselsky, Jew. Alias Voldarsky, real name Cohen, Jew. Alias Sverdlov, real name Sverdlov, Jew. Alias Kamkov, real name Katz, Jew. Alias Ganeski, real name Yurstenberg, Jew. Alias Dan, real name Garovich, Jew. Alias Meshkovsky, real name Goldberg, Jew. Alias Parvus, real name Galfanat, Jew. Alias Rozanoff, real name Goldenbach, Jew. Alias Martinov, real name Zimbar, Jew. Alias Cherkanamarski, real name Cherkana Mordich, Jew. Alias Pielnetsky, real name Levine, Jew. Alias Adramovich, real name Rain, Jew. Alias Lointsef, real name Blakeman, Jew. Alias Zvedich, real name Fonstein, Jew. Alias Reddick, real name Sobelson, Jew. Alias Litvinov, Wallach, real name Finkelstein, Jew. Alias Lunavcharsky, real name Lunacharsky, Russian. Alias Kolnatai, real name Kolnatai, Russian. Alias Peters, real name Peters, Let. Alias Maklakowski, real name Rosenbaum, Jew. Alias Lipinski, real name Levinson, Jew. Alias Vobrov, real name Nathanson, Jew. Alias Ostadox, real name Axelrod, Jew. Alias Gassin, real name Gerfelt, Jew. Alias Glassenoff, real name Schultz, Jew. Alias Lebedeva, real name Limso, Jew. Alias Jaffe, real name Jaffe, Jew. Alias Kamensky, real name Hoffman, Jew. Alias Naut, real name Gunsberg, Jew. Alias Ligorsky, real name Krokmelnik, Jew. Alias Igsgof, real name Goldman, Jew. Alias Valdimirov, real name Feldman, Jew. Alias Bunikov, real name Foundaminsky, Jew. Alias Manulsky, real name Manulsky, Jew. Alias Loreen, real name Lori, Jew. Alias Krasin, real name Krasin, Russian. Alias Ticherin, real name Chicherin, Jew. Alias Gukovsky, real name Gukovsky, Jew. In a total of 545 members of the Bolshevist administration comprises 447 Jews, 30 Russians, 34 Lets, 22 Armenians, 12 Germans, 3 Finns, 2 Poles, 1 Georgian, 1 Czech, 1 Hungarian. These facts are known to everybody, but it is not known that Western Judaism has supported Bolshevism with solidarity. The funds necessary for the Russian Revolution have been supplied by international banks and financiers. We know that thus expression means. The following article by Samuel Gompers explains the situation sufficiently well. I am mindful of the newly adopted policy of the American Anglo-German banking group, which perhaps constitutes the most dangerous element in the whole chain of pro-Bolshevist effort in America, because it has had its hands on the most power. The truth is that predatory international finance has its appetite up and believes it sees loot in Russia. I know of nothing more cynical than the attitude of European statesmen and financiers towards the Russian muddle. Essentially, it is their purpose, as laid down at Genoa, to place Russia in economic vassalage and give political recognition in exchange. American business is asked to join in that helpless, that miserable and contemptible business, the looting of the vast domain, and to facilitate its efforts, certain American bankers engaged in mortgaging the world are willing to sow among their own people the fiendish, anti-democratic propaganda of Bolshevism, subsidizing, buying, intimidating, cajoling. There are splendid and notable exceptions, but the great powers of the American Anglo-German financing combinations have set their faces towards the prize displayed by a people on their knees. Most important is the espousal of the Bolshevist cause by the group of American Anglo-German bankers who like to call themselves international financiers to dignify and conceal their true function and limitation. Specifically, the most important banker in this group, and speaking for this group, born in Germany as it happens, has issued orders to his friends and associates that all must now work for Soviet recognition. Mr. Gompers says further, international finance is also accurately represented in the hopes placed in and the moral backing given to the British Labour Party and the revolutionary international socialism of which it is a member. The 100% socialism of that party in home affairs seems unimportant to view of the international program, ideal from the point of view of these cosmopolitan bankers. The names of several times quoted are not those of individuals only working in their own behalf and for whom Jewry would not be held responsible. Mr. Pitt Rivers, in his book, The World Significance of the Russian Revolution, is definite on this subject. He says, "It is not unnaturally claimed by the Western Jews that Russian Jewry as a whole is most bitterly opposed to Bolshevism. Now, although there is a great measure of truth in this claim, since the prominent Bolsheviks who are preponderantly Jewish do not belong to the Orthodox Jewish Church, it is yet possible, without laying oneself open to the charge of anti-Semitism, to point to the obvious fact that Jewry as a whole has, consciously or unconsciously, worked for and promoted an international economic material despotism which, with Puritanism as an ally, has tended in an ever-increasing degree to crush national and spiritual values out of existence and substitute the ugly and deadening machinery of finance and factory. It is also a fact that Jewry as a whole strove with every nerve to secure and heartily approve of the overthrow of the Russian monarchy, which they regarded as the most formidable obstacle in the path of their ambitions and business pursuits. All this may be admitted, as well as the plea that individually or collectively most Jews may heartily detest the Bolshevist regime, yet it is still true that the whole weight of Jewry was in the revolutionary scales against the Tsar's government. It is true their apostate brethren who are now riding in the seat of power may have exceeded their orders, but that is disconcerting, but it does not alter the fact. It may be that the Jews, often the victims of their own idealism, have always been instrumental in bringing about the events they most heartily disapprove of. That, perhaps, is the curse of the wandering Jew.